So very pleased on behalf of the Financial Shalom Program to have Kim Miller with us today. Kim is a financial counselor at LSS Financial Counseling. LSS partners with the CRCNA to deliver financial counseling to our pastors. It's a nice benefit that that all of the pastors in the CRCNA have, as well as seminarians. And LSS has been wonderful to work with. They, in addition to doing financial counseling, which all of our pastors are eligible for free sessions with them, LSS also has a specialty in debt management, and they are experienced in working with faith leaders. So this is just something to keep in mind if you know pastors, if you work with pastors who could use financial counseling, or just somebody to sit down and look at the big picture with them. We all need that from time to time to pull back from being enmeshed in our finances or whatever, and just to have somebody take a big bird's eye view kind of look at things with you. So keep LSS in mind as you work with pastors, as you encounter pastors, or as you have a pastor yourself. We all could benefit from that from time to time. But very pleased today that that this webinar is open to CRCNA staff as well, because financial uncertainty is something that all of us to some extent navigate. So very pleased that Kim is with us and can share her expertise. There is going to be a webinar a recording of this webinar available afterwards, and I'll also put together a little summary. So if you know somebody who could benefit from this, but they weren't able to make it today, keep your eyes peeled on the network. I'll have that up, and it'll be in a readily shareable format. So with that, I will hand it over to Kim to introduce the topic and take it away. And I'll note this will go about an hour or so, just depending on where things end up. Great. And then there's going to be a time for questions and answers afterwards. And feel free to ask whatever questions you want. If you'd rather that part of the program not be included in the recording for any reason, that is totally fine. Just let me know. You can email me at shalom@crcna.org. Okay, over to you, Kim.
Well, thank you, Nate, for the great introduction. It's probably one of the better ones I've had recently. So thanks, even better than what I could do for myself. So I appreciate it. We appreciate the partnership we have with the Christian Reformed Church and the Financial Shalom Program. So I'm very happy to be with you here with you today. I just want to let you know that I will be available for a couple minutes afterwards as well. So if you wanted to ask some questions, we can stop the recording and then you can ask some questions too. Otherwise, if you have access to the chat box within the Zoom program, you can type your questions there, and I'll be checking that as well. And I'll be taking various breaks throughout the program. So I am going to attempt to share my screen now. So just give me a second here. All right, so we are going to be talking about financial uncertainty today, and we've been doing this webinar, I think, since the beginning of April, and this has changed a couple of times, simply because financial uncertainty has changed over the period of these past 6 months or so. And so you may not be experiencing uncertainty yourself, but you may know people who are, or you took on extra expenses throughout the past couple of months, extra groceries, extra people in your home projects. And there's also just the unknown in general. Am I going to get sick? If you have kids in your family, what do we do for school? So there's a lot of things that we cannot control, but our brain seeks control of what we can. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, is just finding the things that we can control and working on that so that we can be able to face what's coming up in the future. So I'm going to show this is kind of a graphic that we use to kind of show where we at LSS, where we can help people. And so we're all on this spectrum. So there's the bottom is like survival, and that's just focusing on the basic needs of employment and shelter and just, the basic things that we need. LSS of Minnesota, we have a lot of programs that help with that, with homeless youth and refugee settlement and housing and things like that. Within the financial counseling area, we really work with people here in the circle who are between the struggling and stable. So in struggling, we have income, but we are living paycheck to paycheck. Some, we might it might be one paycheck away from major emergency or housing, being able to keep housing. Sometimes you're overwhelmed with debt and you feel like you're making progress. But then in the stable category is the goal of where we do most of our work. There's reduced stress. They're able to set aside money for emergencies. You're working on rebuilding credit. You have debt, a plan for managing debt. And then you can work on future goals like home ownership. And then there's wealth surplus over here, which is where maybe your retirement services focus more on, is helping people set aside money for the future for retirement. So if you notice, the arrow goes up and it also goes down, which means this is a kind of a sliding scale where sometimes in our life we may feel like we're stable, and then sometimes things happen and we feel like we're struggling. And that's kind of the frustration in dealing with finances in general, because we feel like once we get to one spot, we should stay there. But due to circumstances sometimes beyond our control, we find ourselves kind of in this endless loop of trying to get things back on track. And so that's kind of just to name the feelings sometimes that people have regarding financial uncertainty. And so there is a statistic out there that says about 40% of people who live in the United States cannot pay an emergency $400 bill without using credit. And so it is really important then, when we talk about financial uncertainty, is to address that right now. If you're in the thick of it, it can be really difficult to handle things that are coming at you right now. And so it's a little bit of an acknowledgement of, if you are currently in this situation, the steps and the tools that we can give you can help try to mediate that a little bit. But a lot of times, if you are in a position to try to save some money for emergencies, and this can really help you forward too. So I am going to attempt to do my Zoom poll. And I am going to launch this poll. So you are now viewing this poll. I just want to kind of get a check-in. How do you currently feel about your finances, and how comfortable do you feel talking about finances with others? Can people see this? I'm not sure if you're able to see this or not.
Yep, I can see it.
Yes, we can. Yep.
Okay, so I don't know if you're able to, yep. So I don't know if you're willing to respond. All right, so it'll just kind of give me an idea. I thought it would be a way to kind of get things interacted with people. Also, your face has disappeared, so I'm trying to figure out how to share my video panel. Okay, that's fine. All right. So wonderful. So right now, the majority of you feel like things are just okay, or things are maybe on the good side. And then some of you are comfortable talking about others with finances, which is great. And then some just maybe are a little uncertain. And so that's good. I just kind of want to see where the group was at, just to kind of I can always kind of change things within the presentation to kind of focus on that. So if you're feeling okay, oops, all right, so I will share the results. So, okay. So what we're gonna do then is, we're gonna talk about two sides of the coin here. And so when we talk about facing financial uncertainty, there are two groups. One is that when it's fight or flight, and the storm is here. And so you kind of hear the phrase, when the storm hits, take action. And so there's one group of people that are staring already at the storm. And they're like, oh my gosh, the storm is already here. I'm not exactly sure what's happening. And a lot of times the common reaction is just to freeze, and it might feel too late that when the storm is here. And then, so we're going to kind of address that. But then there's also the other group of people that, when before the storm hits, there are some steps that we can take to kind of prevent some of the struggles that you have when the storm comes regarding financial uncertainty. So we will help you prepare to feel like you're ahead of the game a little bit. And so this may feel harder to do because we struggle with optimism bias a lot as people. And so we don't expect or think bad things will happen to us. And while having positivity is helpful, sometimes it can prevent us from really taking that extra step forward to be preventative. And so I'm not going to show this video because it takes too long, but there's this really great TED Talk by Tali Sharot called How to Motivate Yourself to Change Your Behavior. And she just talks about how warnings in and of themselves have limited impact on behavior, but having other incentives can help change people's the way they think about things and the way they act. And so admittedly, our webinar does have a lot of warnings, but hopefully I can provide as well some positive incentives for you to feel like this is why we could work on improving our finances. So the first action, so we're gonna talk about 3 actions today. The first action that we're gonna do is we're gonna conserve cash. And so normally this involves talking about creating a budget. And so, and for, again, there's 2 groups in that. One is I've never looked at my budget or created one. And then 2, I'm pretty good with finances, the other group. And so the question to ask yourself is, can I sock away some extra money during this time? And so when facing financial uncertainty, it's always good to kind of see, is there some extra money to set aside for emergencies and for savings? So the first step is to always, we encourage people to always create a written budget. So it's one thing to have an idea in your head of this is where I think my money is going, but to actually have something physical written down, like this is listing my income, this is listing my expenses, and this is what's left over, can be really powerful because a lot of times it can point out certain expenses that you don't normally count on every month, but then do pop up periodically, like auto maintenance or home maintenance or gifts for holidays or birthdays, car tabs and registration, and things like that are like $80 here, $100 there, but added up over time can really affect someone's budget. And if there's not that extra savings and you're kind of paycheck to paycheck, that's what can really throw things off. So we always encourage just write down everything that comes out. And if you have existing data through your bank statements, you can use your existing data, but it's one thing to have the data, but then it's to take another step and to put it into categories to kind of figure out which money is going where. These are some examples of different budgets that you could use and certain apps. There's a lot of great phone apps now. I personally, admittedly, still don't use one. I'm old school. I use the pen and paper ledger down here. In fact, right now it's an old notebook that my son didn't use. So that's what I use, but I know that a lot of my coworkers use, for example, You Need a Budget is kind of more of a lifestyle budgeting app. It really helps you create goals and sets tracking. And then there's just straight up just regular budgeting where it's like Pair Budget or Excel or QuickBooks, where it's just solid data that you put in yourself and then you kind of project going forward. Now, I do have to just point out that some of these apps are free and then some of these apps do cost money, but a warning, like for example, Mint is free, but as they always say, when things are free, you're no longer the consumer, then you become the product. And so for a lot of, in these cases with free apps, you just have to be aware that at times your data may be gathered up and then sold to companies that collect consumer tracking, that type of thing. So you just want to be aware of that. And also just be really conscious of when you input your personal data to make sure that their securities are in place. But then there's also just regular advice regarding like ideas of how much should I budget? I could get into the weeds on that. I could talk for hours on that too, but just know that there's different ways to allocate your money. And so a good place to start as far as a guideline might be like the 50-30-20 budget, which is 50% wants, 30% needs or discretionary, and then 20% savings. And again, that's in a perfect world. That might shift back and forth, but it's just a good idea to help start. And when people ask us, is this a good idea for my finances? We always go, well, what are your overall goals? And it's just a good help to make decisions. So just to kind of review, when you're dealing with uncertainty or you want to plan for it and you want to try to figure out, okay, where can I conserve extra cash? You really want to kind of categorize your living expenses into 3 main categories. And the first category is essentials. And so that is what you need to do to live a life with dignity. So housing, utilities, groceries, usually insurance, some kind of transportation, medical, needs, all that needs to be met. And so a lot of times, internet access, especially like, when you work from home. So all those things that you need usually are essentials. And so those are the ones that you try to maintain first. And then the second category you want to create is debts, who you owe, what your monthly payments are, what the interest rates are, and that type of thing. So it could be student loan debt, it could be secure debt like vehicles or your home or boats or RVs, and then it could be unsecured debt like loans, credit cards, lines of credit, that type of thing. So you want to just make sure you kind of know, who do you owe and where does it all go to? And we'll cover debts in more detail here later on today. And then the third one is the discretionary. And the discretionary category is kind of like, well, I don't really need it, but it makes my life exciting and worth living, which we all need. Otherwise, our budget would be completely drab and it would be really hard to maintain things. And so that might be entertainment, it might be extra clothing, it might be takeout or eating out, streaming, gaming, that type of stuff. And so that's all discretionary. Now, if you feel like right now your budget is doing really well, this might be your current budget that you can maintain, and that's great. But if you or you're working with or you're helping someone who they're really struggling or their income is about to be reduced or already has been reduced, then you want to go into crisis mode. And even if you aren't in crisis mode, it's always good to pretend so you can label things. And so in a crisis budget, you take out everything you possibly can from the discretionary column first that you can. Or you try to figure out what part of my discretionary budget can I turn into, or can I let go of? And I say let go of because sometimes like cable, like if we're stuck in a contract for 2 years, it might be different as far as maybe online subscriptions where you can kind of cancel and re-add. And so it's always good to kind of take a look at the discretionary stuff to make sure that those extras don't actually become things that you're required to pay because you're going to pay a penalty if you don't. But in a crisis budget, the first thing is you try to figure out what can I cut out tomorrow? Just to try it, and then just tell yourself that in a crisis mode, this is just a temporary thing, maybe for the next 3 to 6 months to buy you some time to get you on your feet again. And so then, but still, even in crisis mode, if you're able, it's always good to at least find one item to make things tolerable. Otherwise, sometimes you might just go, this is not worth it. And then everything, then you kind of just give up. But it's always good, even if you're able to at least give yourself one thing. And for some people, it might be streaming, Netflix or some kind of online thing. For others, it might just being able to get takeout once in a while. And so it varies by person. But then after you kind of go through that exercise of what could I give up tomorrow to conserve some extra cash? What can I do things temporarily? Hopefully when things get, back to where our things have improved, you could end up with a revised budget where you have a little bit of everything, but it's a little bit less and allows you to save a little bit extra money going forward. And so this could, again, be a temporary thing, or it could be more of a permanent change of, I can really take steps because I have a major goal coming up that I would like to reach. And so it's never a bad time. And especially as we head into the colder months, our spending sometimes changes anyway with the different seasons. And so I like to call it fall and spring cleaning. It's never a bad time to take a look at your spending and your overall budget during this time and go, what, the holidays are coming up. What does my budget look like? And it's October, and then you have a couple of months before the holidays hit to make those changes. So within this budget here, you have your revised budget, you have your goals set in place, and then all of a sudden money disappears from your bank account that you have no idea what happened. Who's had that happen to them? It's me. I've had that too. It's like, oh, I thought I had $20 in there. Where'd it go? And those are called money leaks. So the next thing we're going to talk about is, okay, stop sharing results, relaunch polling. What the heck? Okay. Here we go. All right. The poll that you will see is, what do you think your biggest money leak is? Your options are eating out, takeout, online shopping, Or you might say, hey, Kim, I'm just trying to pay my bills. It's one big leak. Maybe you might be paying extra bank fees or late fees. You may not be sure. That's one option. Shopping without a list. Or if none of the leaks are mentioned here, feel free to just pick other, and you can always tell me in chat. So if you are wondering this, like, oh, shopping without a list. Yep, there's an other. And then takeout. Yep. That is always hard. And so, yeah, so it's always a little bit different here when it's talking about where your money leaks might be coming. And so money leaks are basically just things that might be unconscious spending. And so it's always good just kind of be aware, again, from tracking your spending to kind of figure out like, where's the money going? You can always compare it to what you have planned to spend. And then you can ask yourself, is this something that I can change? What can be my new plan? So I have always used my spouse as an example. So like back in the day when he worked in an office, there was a vending machine, and it was very reasonable, but it was still like $1 a day that he was spending for a soda. And so I finally was like, can you just buy a 12-pack of soda and keep it in your office? And he goes, I suppose. And so, I mean, and even though it was just $1 a day, it still added up. And so that saved us, $20 here or there. And so I understand that sometimes in stressful and tight financial situations, there may not be any money leaks right now, and that's completely understandable. But for those who are trying to find maybe an extra $25 or so to set aside in savings, sometimes, figuring out those small spending costs can really help. And also being able to save money to buy things in bulk, while it may be hard to start up front, can save you money in the long term too. Yep. And so someone sent the list. Yep. There's 3 different money leaks that they may have found. But I was working with a client who could only afford sometimes to buy, like one toilet paper roll at a time. She would buy it at the local gas station. And so with a little bit of, she had very limited funds. And so with a little bit of tweaking, then she was really happy eventually to be able to buy like an 8-pack. And that saved her, $3 or $4 a week, when she wouldn't have been able to do that before. So sometimes it's a matter of rethinking of how you buy things too, to save some money. And there's always opportunity costs. What you buy today may affect spending in the future. And so it's always a slide to remind them of, not that anyone is out right now buying a $7 strawberry smoothie, but it's always an idea of like what, you don't want to harm what's going on tomorrow with maybe what you might be spending today. So there's always something to keep in mind with opportunity cost and spending. And then the last thing to point out is cash or plastic, which unfortunately in the times of COVID, it may be harder to spend with cash. But unfortunately, as a result of that, there has been studies from in the Forbes magazine once did a study in 2018 that said sometimes people spend up to 100% more using plastic than over cash. And that's because with swiping a card, you don't actually physically have a limit as far as this. Like if you have $100 in cash and you were buying groceries, then you knew I can't go over $100. But sometimes with our card, if we're at the grocery store, it ends up being $50 extra or something, well, then it's just easy to be like, well, I'll just make it up later. And then you swipe the card and go. And then our brain doesn't always make that connection that this is what we're actually spending now. It's always like, oh, this is tomorrow's problem, what I'm doing today. And so sometimes it's always good to, if you are having a hard time with your spending or really not knowing where your money is going and you're having and you don't like tracking, which is completely understandable. Sometimes it might just be a good idea of, okay, if you have a goal of you're only going to spend, let's say, $200 on groceries, pulling that money out in cash, sticking it in an envelope, and then living off of that, then really can show you, okay, this is my money, this is how I'm going to spend it. And when it's gone, can I go without the rest of the month? So it really is a visual thing. And also, personally, I don't like spending cash because I don't like seeing my money going. And so it also is a psychological thing of when you're handing over cash. That's why with kids too, and kids and money, it's always good to keep things tangible with cash as well. So the envelope system can be helpful. So you set up, you make sure that you leave enough in your checking account for your ongoing bills, maybe with online pay for utilities and such. But then, for gas or for groceries or for things that you may have hard time, like, the miscellaneous spending, having that in a cash envelope can help, again, temporarily for the next, 3 months or so, to kind of figure out, okay, what's my spending habit and can I sock away a little bit extra as a result. I'm checking in right now. That's the end of the first action of conserving cash. Any questions on that? We're a small enough group that you can unmute yourself if you'd like to and ask the question. Otherwise, I will keep on.
Yeah, this seems to be redundant, but
Sure.
you are actually saying that we should really take care of those money leaks. Because like I found that we had that, especially eating, like on Saturdays. But I kind of like ignore those things, but I know how it really make a difference in the budget, because it's usually like $100 is more than one person that we go out, we got the family. And we just don't say like, we're gonna do once a month. Like we cannot do it whenever we feel like, but it hurts at the end.
Yep, agreed.
So will you advise to say, okay, we're gonna do it once a month? We will still do it, but like once a month rather than.
I that's a great question. I think especially when the family is involved, I think it's great to involve. It's okay to be upfront with them, because sometimes when we personally make decisions, like I'm the one that handles the finances and the budget. And so if I were to say, okay, we're only going to eat once a month, all the rest of the family sees is less. They don't see the results of, because we're only eating out once a month, we can save X dollars extra a month for something else. All the family sees is, well, I only can eat once a month. That's not fair. And so I would, with that, might pair that with something visual, or maybe a family goal. Like, is there something as a family that you've always really wanted to do that having that extra money saved each month can accomplish that instead? And so then the family knows as a general, okay, like we used to eat out X amount of times a month. Our goal now is just to do it once. We can save this amount of money, and as a result, we can do this. And then having something in your kitchen, or a chart or a jar where you can put extra money in, it's very visual. And so then everyone's on board. And so then it's not always, like you keep on saying no, and but I don't really like that. Not that they talk like that. Sorry, that's my teen voice. But it's just to get everyone on board. It's more of a positive, like I said, warnings can only go so far. And so by saying like, if we spend too much, then we don't have this, but if we say, hey, if we are able to save this, then we're able to accomplish X, that might be a little bit more motivating. But yeah, definitely. It's always good just to set a goal, just to say, and like I said, it could be temporary too. It's not, if your budget allows you to eat out more than once, then by all means, like as long as everything else is taken care of, then that's fine. But if you had a specific reason or a goal, like, hey, we want to go on vacation, or we want to be able to do this, it's okay to set those limits, and it doesn't always have to last forever too. Did that answer your question? I'm
really glad that you really give some good inputs on how to handle that well.
Yeah, because again, sometimes when we just say, well, I'm not going to do this anymore, like we know the reason why, but maybe the rest of people that we live with don't know why. And so it's always good to encourage that. So, all right. So the next action that we're going to take is, so we're talked about conserving cash. And so now we're going to manage debt. And so in times of uncertainty, I really like to use the word manage, because it doesn't necessarily always mean pay. It means exploring all of your options to make sure that everything is managed in some ways, especially right now when there are a lot of areas where you can defer things. And so this is the section that we're looking at. So the different areas of debt. And so in tough times, this kind of goes against the rule of thought in general regarding debt payments. So our gut reaction when we hear about managing debt, our initial knee-jerk reaction is always, I want to pay it off as fast as possible, as much as possible. But in the spirit of the first action of conserving cash, we also want to, during tough times, manage debt so that we can still conserve cash. I can't tell you that there's a lot of clients that we work with that in the spirit of trying to do things well, they pay down too much of their debt, but do not keep enough cash. And so if their income is changed, then they have to go back to their debt again to kind of help them with emergencies, which can psychologically be draining because you're paying off debt, you're going back into debt. And so in tough times, conserve your cash and then just try to have an ongoing steady plan for the debt during this time while you weather the storm. And so when I say go to minimum payments on all debts, I don't say this going forward the rest of the life of the debt, but I'm saying during this tough time, if you have credit card debt, it is okay just to pay minimum payments so you can tread water. Or the next step is you can call creditors or your lenders to ask to defer payments, pay interest only, or sometimes people are able to rework their loan depending on their credit status and their asset that's attached to it. And so for some clients during this time, if they've lost their job, or even if they haven't, but they have no emergency savings, I have had people take deferments on their mortgage or their car. It's a big risk, but if it's allowed them to set aside money for emergencies, like I had one person who was working seasonally and their income was they were working, but it was order reduced in the summer, but then they knew in the winter time they were not going to be able to work due to their employment. They took the deferment, even though they could make the payment, so they could set aside money for the leaner months to come in the future. And so again, anytime you take a deferment with a lender, you want to make sure you get all the details as far as what's going to happen after you take the deferment. A lot of times it is take the missed payments and tack it on to the end of the loan, but you want to make sure that that's exactly what they're going to do so that there's no surprises and you don't have to pay all of a sudden those 3 months of missed payments up front. But for student loans, there's forbearance now through the end of the year. We're not exactly sure what's going to happen after that, but at least for now through December 31st on federal loans, you don't have to make payments. On FHA mortgages, you can take a long deferment and other things. There's eviction moratoriums now for renters. And that can vary by state. So you always want to just double check with the state that you live in, but there's a lot of protections for that. If you have private student loans, we have found the servicers are also willing to work with you as well. And so they are giving forbearances and hardship plans on that too. So if they aren't federally backed, it's okay. Student loan servicers are still willing to work with you. And then also you can just give us a call and we can look at your debt and help you come up with some options as well. So those are kind of 5 steps you can use in managing debt during tough times. If you're wondering, well, what's the order of debt that I should focus on? If you can't pay on everything, make sure that you have a plan in place for these debts in this order. And I say plan in place because again, you may have a mortgage and or a car loan. You may not have to pay it first, but you definitely need to make sure there's a plan so that they're not going to come after you. And so in Minnesota, there has been housing assistance funds that have been released for people with mortgages and rent. I know that in various other states, there are also housing assistance programs too. A lot of states got money through the CARES Act. And so it's happening. Some of them did it early. Like I think California, all their funds are given out now. But in the Midwest, I found that it's still ongoing because they started a little bit later. So you always want to check back. You can always Google COVID housing assistance, whatever state agency that you might be in. Then there's high priority government debt that you want to make a plan for. And that's because with government debt, they can get at your paychecks a lot easier than other people or your tax refunds and things like that. But the good news is with government debt, they have also usually been more willing to set up payment plans and deferments and things like that on your behalf too. So don't be scared to give them a call. Always keep in contact with them. And then the last priority should always be those unsecured debts, the credit cards, the loans, medical bills, collection accounts. But here's the kicker. This bottom category is always the loudest. They're always the ones to call you first. But just because they call you first, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to pay them first, or you should. You should just be aware that they're the loudest because they're scared that you might not be able to pay them eventually. With medical bills especially, we have found that clients aren't aware of financial assistance programs through their medical facility. So I always encourage you, if you have a big medical bill that you're not exactly sure how to pay, don't just ignore it and let it go to collections. Contact the billing office, see if there's financial assistance available, fill out the paperwork. It's a pain in the butt, but it can be worth it to maybe get part of it forgiven or all of it. Or sometimes then they're able to set up affordable payment plans because you filled out the paperwork to show good faith. So then again, you're just kind of creating a situation where you can tread water and then you don't have to worry about future collections down the road. But with the unsecured stuff, if you can't pay it, you want to make sure that, your other essentials are paid first. So just to talk a little bit about credit cards. And so credit cards can be hard because it has compound interest and it's working against you. You always hear about compound interest and retirement accounts working for you because it's money, earning money with extra money on top for you for the retirement. But with credit cards, it does the exact opposite. So the average American right now has about $15,000 of credit card debt. And so if they have an interest rate of around 18.9, which is actually a little bit on the lower side, but let's say on average they have 18%. If you just paid the minimum payment, it will take you over 30 years to pay it off, and you will end up paying $43,000 of interest over time. So for every dollar that you spend today, you will end up paying $4 down the road. And so that's kind of not so great. It's just really a bad investment overall. So again, the thought process is always, I need to pay this off as fast as possible. And so if you are in tough times, keep on making the minimum payment, knowing that eventually down the road, you could do something different. But if you are currently in credit card debt and you can afford to make your payments and everything else, this is just kind of a slight encouragement to take this time now to work on paying down your debt over time to free up some extra cash for you in the future. The reason why minimum payments can be dangerous is because let's say the payment starts out at $300, which is 2% of the balance. As you slowly pay off this debt, your minimum payment also decreases by $1, $1.50 over time every month. And so it doesn't feel like a big deal. And so if you just set up, well, I'll just pay the minimum payment, no big deal. It doesn't feel like a big deal, but because it ratchets it down every little bit, it does take a long time to pay off. So if you are feeling frustrated and you don't have a whole lot of extra money to pay off credit card debt, but you want to do something, what you can do right now is just pay your minimum payment going forward, but don't change it. So for example, on the same $15,000 debt, if your minimum payment is $300 and you keep it at $300 every month, instead of taking 30 years to pay off, it'll take you 100 months, which is what, a little over 9 years. And instead of paying $43,000 of interest, you only pay $14,000, which is still quite a bit of interest. But as you can see, a little extra dollar or two a month can make a big difference on your credit card debt long term. And so this is a perfect example of just a small step, a small positive step forward can make a huge difference in your financial life going forward. And so if you're looking for something small to start today, I would always start there. If you can afford your minimum payments, then just add an extra dollar or two on top of that and then keep it the same. And it may not feel like a big deal, but a year from now, you'll realize that it made a big difference. For those ready who are starting to, we're actually getting a lot of interest in paying down debt too. People are feeling really extra nervous, but they still have their income coming in steadily, but they're staring at their debt and they're going, I really need to start paying off my credit card debt. We've seen a huge increase this fall. And so I just wanted to quickly describe what a debt manager plan is in case you weren't familiar with that. So that's something that we offer that Nate mentioned in the beginning. Unfortunately, we cannot offer debt manager plans in certain states, and I think Michigan is one of them, but we will partner with another nonprofit that's an NFCC agency that will handle it we can hand it off to them too, we can partner with them. But a debt manager plan is, you pay us one payment, we pay the credit card companies for you, the accounts are still in your name, and then as a result, because we're part of this larger National Foundation for Credit Counseling Agency, most major credit card companies are willing to reduce your interest rate to help you get out of debt faster. And so you're still paying the debt in full. You're still paying all your individual accounts. You're And usually the payment is roughly the same, if not maybe a little bit less. And so, for example, on average debt manager plans, the average interest rate could be around 7% after you average all the different creditors and what they can offer. And so instead of taking 43 years or 9 years on a debt manager plan, it takes less than 5 years to pay off. And instead of paying $43,000 of interest or even $15,000 of interest, you end up only paying $2,700. So for those who are ready to really say, you know what, I'm going to commit now, I'm going to pay down my debt, this can be a really good option. But we're not on commission. We're a nonprofit financial counseling agency. So this is just one tool in our toolbox so we can help you in managing your finances. If this is not a good fit, that's fine. Then we coach you on try to pay off your debt on your own instead, doing a different matter. But I just wanted to bring it up because it can be helpful, and it tends to be something that people are looking into, especially right now. Are there any questions about managing debt or priorities? Okay, I am not seeing anyone looking like they're going to ask me questions, so I'm going to move forward. So the last action is using the savings. Okay, so now you've conserved your cash, you've managed your debt to maybe even conserve more cash, and now I'm telling you it's time to use your savings. And you go, wait a minute, that sounds not so fun. But this is why we have savings. So in quote unquote ordinary times, when things are not nearly as chaotic as they are now, this is kind of the overall plan of attack that we help people, we walk them through to make sure they can establish overall financial wellness. And so the pyramid is, the bottom is always make sure you're spending less than you earn. Make sure you have about $1,000 in emergency savings. And then we tackle high interest rate debts. And then we encourage you to save even more money in case you were to lose your job. Then you have 3 to 6 months of expenses to buy you some time. And then you slowly work off paying off your other low interest debts, like perhaps student loans or mortgages or things like that. And then all the while we encourage retirement savings, but then, you know, once you kind of get up here, then you really want to work on focusing on the future for retirement. So that's kind of the overall plan that we have usually in ordinary times. When things are uncertain, part of the pyramid on the bottom is to ask yourself, are there community resources in the area that can help me out in the meantime to help preserve the emergency savings they may already have, or maybe to help me to start having the emergency savings to build my pyramid with a stronger foundation. And so it is October 20th. And so energy assistance has started in many areas. I know that in Minnesota it started October 1st. I believe it's kind of a nationwide thing. So if they qualify, they can get help with their utility bills. I know that for kids who are in school, regardless of income right now, the USDA has a program where everyone can get free lunches. Even if you're 100% online, you can make arrangements to pick up lunches and breakfasts for your school, for your kid at specific pickup areas. They can just contact their local school districts. Now is a good time to research different cell phone plans. Is there a way to look at maybe pay as you go instead to save some money? Food banks, those kind of things are really popular. So, and so I always encourage, I think United Way is kind of a nationwide resource that we can all use, that if you call United Way, it's a hub that you can find out if there's food banks nearby. It also can help you direct you in the way of certain assistance programs for your state, especially if your income has changed. A lot of times we found that clients who may not have been approved for food share or food benefits in the past now do because their income has been reduced. And so now's the time to take advantage of that to help, again, stretch that dollar. And so and sometimes people end up using savings to help pay for these essentials. And like what we're seeing now, because Minnesota started their housing assistance program later, those who used credit cards or what are taking out debt to help pay for rent, unfortunately, that housing assistance doesn't help them anymore because they're quote unquote current, and so that's where it's hard. It's a fine line of how much running around do you want to, or not running around, but how much scrambling do you do to help manage your essentials, and then how much do you say, well, hopefully there'll be assistance to help me in the future. So I know that's always a fine line to cross, but if I, you know, and I'm sure churches are being approached too, as far as for assistance programs, and certain churches may have, you know, extra help for their community or their members too. So I just a quick, another poll here. Let's see, okay. So my question is, have you had a surprise expense in the past 6 months, and how did you handle it? And this is relative to using savings, is because savings is important because it is, things always pop up when we least expect it. And so it's always good. Yep. And so all of you have saying, oh, one person did not have an expense, and that's good. That's really lucky. But the rest of you have had expenses and you were able to have savings to handle it. So yay, that's really good. And so this is just another encouragement to why you should have savings. And just to flip it for the positive side. So before we talked about the 40% who didn't have the savings, I like to flip it and at the end saying there's still 60% of us that could handle an emergency without credit. And I would love to see this number increase in the future. And every little bit helps. There was a research done that people with as little as $250 in savings are less likely to be evicted or miss a housing or utility payment when income is affected. And so this is why, you know, we talk about conserving cash and doing all that work up front. This is the payoff. But there's a lot of feelings involved with savings because when we have to use savings, there might be frustration or a feeling that you failed because you're always told, I should have savings and keep it there. But some savings is important to help weather those periodic expenses. And so that's why that base of $1,000 is really helpful. Kind of convince yourself that's just kind of always there. It's like a put and take account. You put money in there, you take it out. You put more in there, you take it out. And so that's kind of a flowing one. But by having the savings, it can help preserve retirement accounts. And so that's kind of the overall goal when you want to have overall financial wellness and focusing on the future, is that if you're setting aside money for retirement or for the future, it might be really tempting in tough times to stare at that account and go, I could really use that money now. But talking about compound interest earlier for credit card debt, that same growth happens in your retirement account. If you're able to let that money sit, it can give you tenfold in the future. And so you want to so this is kind of the plan to preserve your future investments, because you don't want to sacrifice your future for what happens today. And so in the meantime, if you don't have these savings things on this end, using savings can help preserve you from increasing your credit card debt. But temporarily, if you are contributing money to your retirement account, but you need the money now, a good first step might be to temporarily reduce your savings, or reduce your contributions from your paycheck to retirement before actually taking money out of your retirement account. And so, and in fact, I read on Twitter, like there was this article on BuzzFeed that was encouraging people to cash out their 401k to pay down their student loan debt. And I just want to also say that that's also not a good idea, because like there's no penalties right now to pull money out of your 401k during COVID. And so people are saying, well, now there's no penalty, there's no extra 10% penalty to pull your money out early. You can use that to pay down debt. But I'm always like, don't, like, you know, you can borrow money for now, but you can't borrow money to retire on in the future. Like you can't be, 65 and retire, take out a loan to build your pension. And so you just want to be careful with that, and to using, long-term savings for something that is maybe a little bit more shorter term. So that's why we encourage people to use your short-term savings, leave your long-term investments alone if possible. Whoops, that's all right. So are there any questions? Oh, there. Oh, I forgot to update. That's the wrong Zoom poll, but I do have a final thing here to ask you. Does anyone have any questions on savings? Okay, I have a final poll. Now what's going on here? Here we go. Okay, so we're going to wrap up. So the final poll that I have for you is, how do you feel now? Do you feel more confident in handling your finances? And do you feel more comfortable talking about your finances with other people? It's okay, I won't be offended if you say no. Okay, well, all of you did say yes. So yay, thank you. That makes me feel good. Okay, so I'll just share the results that yes, all of you feel more confident. So that's good. Okay. Just one last thing to point out is part of being our partnership together, you are part of Financial Choice. And so you get 6 free one-on-one sessions for you and your immediate family members. We do offer 10 locations. And the one I forgot to update this, statewide means in Minnesota. We have one in Wisconsin, but we do offer, right now, everything is online and phone counseling. And so you can give us a call and you can schedule and talk to someone. The biggest feedback that we hear that we're proud of is when people report that they never feel judged, that they feel like it's someone they can talk to and be able to ask questions and to be able to walk through their situation. And that's what we're happy to do. And so if you or you know someone who might want to talk to someone, we encourage you to give us a call. These are the services that we provide. We provide budget and debt counseling. We provide housing counseling, even sometimes pre-purchase home buyer programs. If you do live in other states, we might encourage you to partner up with a different HUD agency, but we can definitely give you some information initially up front, especially like a credit report review. We pull your report and able to give you a credit score and walk you through that. And it's a soft inquiry, does not hurt you, just for educational purposes. And we talk about student loan repayment and then the debt management plans. And we also offer financial education, which is what you're participating in now. So that's all I got for you today, wrapped up in a quick 50-minute presentation. I appreciate your time. I just wanted to open it up to any other questions that people may have.
Hi, Kim. I have a question, and I don't know if this is more for you or Nate. I work in payroll, which would be more with our employees, but I also work with the minister's pension office.
Okay.
And there I work with retired and active ministers.
Sure.
And especially with the ministers, more so than active employees, conversations will come up where the ministers are struggling because of church budgets. They had to cut their salary.
Yep.
Can I send them directly to you? Should I send them to Nate first, or how should I refer them, I guess? What's the appropriate avenue there?
Yeah, that's a great question, Katie. So on the Financial Shalom website, and I can actually drop a link in the chat, but on the Financial Shalom website, we have a link to our special LSS page. So it's a sub page that is for CRCNA pastors, and it kind of explains, here's who qualifies, here's how you book an appointment, that kind of thing. That's it.
So that's right on the Financial Shalom page. Okay, and I have been on there before. I've sent pastors there, so this is on there now. Okay, great.
It is. Yep, it is, and it's under training.
Okay.
Yep.
And I know here it says pastors and seminarians. Could a staff member also use this, or do they need to be a minister?
That's a good question. No, it is for kind of ordained pastors and seminarians.
Okay, good to know. Thanks.
But you can call me if you'd like. I can.
Okay, well, being in payroll, you hear and you have people come to you with very strange situations sometimes.
Yes.
And it's nice to be able to say, I can't help you, but here, this person might be able to.
Well, I guess I can't, as far as the Financial Shalom program, that's on Nate. But if you had you'll have my email here. Nate can pass it along. So if you have any questions, I can answer that too. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can include Kim's email on the summary after this as well.
Yeah, and I will provide you all with handouts, basically a PDF version of this presentation, and along with some other handouts too that you might find helpful that you could just pass out too in general, to say, hey, we got this from our Financial Choice partner, here's some handouts. Hopefully this can help you too and get you in the right direction. So, all right, I'm gonna stop sharing so then I can see the rest of you. Otherwise, I was talking to avoid at one point. So, all right. Yeah, really great questions, everyone. Any other Any other things?
Kim, I've got a general question.
Sure.
You know, I think it was really great, the poll you did that showed people feel more comfortable talking about finances. Like in general, have you seen anything that works in encouraging a culture of openness about finances? I know in like churches can be, and especially sometimes, a strange place to talk about it. And I know that a lot of pastors have hesitations about opening up about finances. So I know obviously ideally there's comfort in working with a counselor like you, but have you seen any other have noticed any trends or anything, especially in a time that people are aware that finances are in flux for a lot of people?
Yes, that's a great question and important to talk about. I think with anything, reducing the stigma of talking about something, and there's a lot of fear, especially in churches. When growing up, the only time I heard about finances was really about stewardship and and giving, and so it wasn't really talking about personal finances. What we've been finding though is, especially and the feedback that we've gotten from pastors and ministers who have taken advantage of financial choice, it has allowed them to feel more confident, and so that they can talk about it themselves too. And so I think sometimes just admitting that, like, even me as a financial counselor, like I give this webinar, but I am not the end all be all either of all answers, and I'm still continually learning. And so just starting starting money conversations with one another, saying, hey, how are you feeling? Like, because it's all about wholeness. We talk about the spiritual side of things, and the physical health, but also financial health. And I really think just even a simple question of, hey, like, we've talked about like your physical health, and we're talking about spiritual side of things, but like how are things like going with your finances? Like, do you feel like you're comfortable? Or if someone makes a comment of like, oh man, like I don't know how I'm going to pay XYZ bill, it's just saying, well, tell me more about that. And just even, you don't have to have the answers. I think just being able to say, yep, I hear you, like this is really hard. Like, I'm struggling with this too. I'm scared about my job, or I've had to have a reduction in income. Just acknowledging that, yep, finances are really tricky. And even just even for you, Nate, even coming out and saying like, it's hard to talk about finances, even just starting there. But I think just being able to name those feelings and to be able to address it. And then like in the church setting too, it's like, well, like, yeah, just being open about your own personal situation, I think, and being willing to share. We've had a couple of other pastors come to us saying, like, after they went through an appointment with a counselor, they were able to readjust their budget, and they realized it wasn't so scary. And so then they started incorporating it slowly, like, in small steps, like first with like marriage counseling, encouraging, those couples doing that. And then, going forward with just in general, like just talking about financial health as, part of the whole circle. I think if that makes sense. So I think just starting to talk about it, just looking at like with mental health and with anything else, just being open and honest and saying, yep, like we all, it's hard. We're, and I think with our kids too, they pick up on stuff. And so that's what I was talking about earlier, is that, kids sometimes only hear the word no, and they don't really know the reason why. And, and just slowly incorporating that in your daily talk too can help reduce that fear of, what's going on. I hope that answered. So
Yeah, that's very helpful.
Yeah. Just, and you're not going to be perfect at it right away. Like, even be giving these webinars, like this is this multiple time that I've done it, and it's always different a little bit each time, because you just never know what's going to come out of my mouth. But just know that the first couple of times might be really awkward talking about finances. You may not have the right words, and that's okay. I'm just saying.
The phrase "fumble forward" comes to mind.
Hey, I like that.
As you say, yes. Not going to get it right the first time, but you build a vocabulary, build an ability to talk about it as you fumble with other people.
Yeah. And I think just, same thing with faith talks, is talking about one's faith is not always comfortable either, but the more that we do it, it just becomes part of our general.
Yeah. I see that you say there are counselors in Spanish as well, right?
Yes. Yes, we
Um,
do have
do you
bilingual.
do this seminar in Spanish?
That's a great
Oh,
question.
well, not necessarily you, but maybe with translation. Oh, I don't know.
No, yeah,
Spanish.
that's a great question. I don't, we've only right now given webinars in English. And so there really hasn't been an ask for any webinars in a different language, but that is something if, you were interested in, I guess we definitely have counselors who counsel in Spanish. And so we can see if they might be interested in.
Yeah, I think it will be great if we can have this seminar available in Spanish, and then we will have people interested on sessions, personal sessions.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but yeah, if you will find more about that, let me know. I work with Nate also in the same financial salon board,
Okay.
and yeah, so I am able to meet a group of, gather a group of Latino pastors and invite them for a seminar like this, and I'm sure that everyone will be really happy to.
Yeah, Marco, that's a great idea, and Kim and I will work on that and get back to you about that.
Mm-hmm.
Really good idea. Thank you.
A translation to Korean would be nice too. We have a bunch of Korean pastors
Mm-hmm.
if you really want to go crazy, but that'd be another avenue that would be really nice to offer to our Korean ministers as well.
Yeah.
Good idea on that as well, Katie. And we've begun discussing it. So I think your suggestion is impetus to keep that conversation going forward too. Yeah. Well, good point. Kim, did you have anything else, or does anybody else have other questions?
I think I've talked enough today, but it's been great. Thank you all. You've been really wonderful, and I appreciate this conversation. I hope this recording can be helpful to others in the future. And if you have any other questions, feel free to send me an email.
Yeah, thanks everyone for attending. I'll put a summary as well as Kim's email and this recording up on the network. I'll also email all y'all that registered as well so that you have that straight away. So thanks so much for attending, and thanks Kim for your presentation today.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone.
Right. Bye.